Welcome to the Channel 99 Review Public Access Television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas.
And I'm your co-host and producer, Mike Kruchoski.
Is the Channel 99 Review anti-feminist? Is it sexist? Some people who watched the last program thought so, and we'll be talking about that. Later in the program, we'll also be talking about Sam Keen's current novel, Fire in the Belly. What is it men really want? We'll be replying to some of the queries called in by some of our previous viewers. We'll also look at current news in the Journal Tribune, along with a discussion about the popular motion picture Thelma and Louise. Finally, this is our second to last program.
Stay tuned for this and more. We'll be back in just a few moments.
Welcome to the Channel 99 Review. I'm your host, Mike Rivas. One of the topics we'll be discussing today is the current popular motion picture, Thelma and Louise, which I thought the Journal Tribune gave tremendously unbiased and balanced view of in a feature they did in the Saturday morning paper. It's raised a lot of controversy. People are wondering, is it male bashing? Is it an accurate depiction of men? Is it an accurate depiction of feminists? I like if I could quote Rick Nathanson here, who did the local for it. He was saying, depending on who you ask, the movie is a feminist manifesto or a fable, a collection of caricatures or an accurate slice of life. Is it a good movie or bad drama, emasculating or entertaining? Or is it just a good motion picture?
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it.
And what did you think?
I thought that, well, what did I think? I thought that I went away with the sense that I kept wanting to help, and I wanted to see men in the motion picture help and support the heroines. You know, the protagonists, the two women. I wanted to see somebody lend them some aid, and only Harvey Keitel tried to do that, playing a police officer in a roundabout way. He tried to be there and save them from their own bad ends, so to speak.
Well,
and I thought it was a good flick. I wouldn't go see it 3 times in a row, but I will probably get it and watch it again on video at some point in the future. It was entertainment.
Well, I haven't had the chance to see it, and I probably won't. I don't see many movies these days, but I do know that it's causing quite a stir. And as Mike mentioned, a lot of people are saying it's male bashing. Others are saying that, hey, this is the way life is. We'll talk about that later in the show, and I hope that you'll think about it. If you've seen it or if you've read about it, do you have an opinion? Give us a call.
292-3263.
As we mentioned earlier, this is our second to last show, and by the way, it's our last live call-in show. So if you don't call in tonight to express your opinions, that'll be it. Before we go ahead and talk about Thelma and Louise and some of the other things we're going to talk about tonight, we wanted to address one of the comments about our last program. For those of you who saw it, you'll remember that we started off with several jokes, the last of which asked, how many feminists does it take to change a light bulb?
How many does it take, Mike?
It takes 2, but we're going to leave the punchline out today.
All right.
After that show, we heard from one person who felt that the show was too anti-feminist. And when I asked for further details, I was told we had focused too much on the male-female conflict and we had sounded too angry. These comments prompted us to ask ourselves and others if this show, the Channel 99 Review, really is anti-feminist. Well, I certainly hope not. And I sincerely believe that it isn't. As the show's producer, one of my primary goals is fair and balanced coverage and discussion of the topics that we cover. I have no intent to demean or disparage over one half of the population simply on the basis of their sex. That assertion that we're too anti-feminist left me somewhat depressed because I had at one time considered myself a feminist in the sense that I yearned for the ideals that many feminists espoused. Equal opportunity and treatment under the law, freedom from sexual stereotyping, the right to be judged as an individual, not as a member of a group, and more equitable and harmonious relations between men and women. I no longer call myself a feminist because of what I perceive as feminism's failure to maintain those altruistic goals. For many men today, it seems that today's feminists want to replace one sexist system with another one in which women would be dominant. There's an old saying, we're all equal, some of us are just more equal than others. And that's what many men perceive about the attitudes of some women today. Not all women, but some. And the result is often anger. I believe that the men's movement has focused on looking inward first to begin dealing with that anger. The men that I know are honestly examining their own responsibility for the predicaments they find themselves in today. At that same point, though, at some point, however, men will want to bring these issues that they discover and examine out into the open to discuss not just with other men, but with women as well. Men and women are less likely to resolve long-standing differences of opinion and social problems unless we're willing to talk about these issues in the open. In my opinion, it's absolutely essential to acknowledge men's anger and its sources. Unfortunately, many women avoid conflict at all costs. Sociolinguist Deborah Tannen, author of the recent bestseller, You Just Don't Understand, says that women see conflict as a threat to relationships and intimacy. As a result, when men express their anger in honest attempts to resolve differences with women, women often interpret that anger as an attempt to dominate or oppress them. As Tannen puts it, the dynamics of male-female communication are far too complex to support such an automatic and simplistic conclusion. I truly hope most open-minded viewers, both men and women, don't feel that we're anti-feminists or anti-women. We're not anti-anything. We're here to discuss issues that we think are important for today's society. No matter what your opinion, we're always interested in hearing from you. And as always, you can call in right now at 292-3263 to tell us what you think about this. Or you can wait until later at the end of the show and copy down my home address or phone number in the credits and give me a call there. Well, after that,
here we are all alone together, huh?
All alone together. I think what we were going to do first is address some of the questions that were raised last week by a caller named Ruth. Mm-hmm. Replies to Ruth. In fact, I kind of.
What is it men want? Is that the?
What is it that
men
want?
What is it that we really want?
You know, before the show, we were going to sit down and listen to that to refresh our memory about what it was exactly that she said, but
we didn't do it.
We didn't do it. Mm-hmm. God, we're not prepared.
Well, we're about as prepared as we ever are.
Well, one of the comments that Ruth made was, you men, you white men, have oppressed women for...
Pink men.
pink men, for thousands of years, and now you want to take away our children. And that was in response to a comment that I made that I felt that men ought to, as a sort of as an equal opportunity or affirmative action, ought to get custody of the children in divorces 50% of the time. And Ruth thought that I wanted to take away her children. So, do you remember that comment?
I remember that comment. I think what I remember most of is the amount of anger and hostility that I felt coming, and I also got the definite impression that she didn't hear a word we were saying.
Well,
it seemed, didn't she talk for about just 10 minutes straight on without stopping once?
No, I don't recall 10 minutes straight, but one of the things that popped into my mind as I was thinking about this over the space of 4 weeks is, first of all, I didn't say that we're trying to take away children from their mothers, but there is another way of looking at it, and many of the men who are divorced might say, well, gee, after years of making us support you, you take away our children, now you want to take away our money. So, we can twist this any way we want and come up with some kind of crazy interpretation of what we said. But,
my viewpoint on as long as what we're talking about what men want, what we're talking about, for me, really, the issue in America today is that there's an attempt at a healing going on. I think that America's wounds are open and bleeding, that this generation has come out of apparently the children who grew up in the 50s and the 60s and experienced the 70s have grown up in situations of abandonment, abuse, emotional, physical, tremendous amount for women, a tremendous amount of sexual abuse. I think that the issue here for me is the hearth and the child, because what I want to do is I want to see that kind of chaos and that kind of soul damage and that kind of emotional damage stopped. And I can't do anything about the world. I can't, other than myself. And I think that by putting the focus on me and what I can do, and the reason I like to come down here and volunteer for your little show is because what we look at here on the Channel 99 Review is solutions. We're not looking at blame. We're not saying anything is anybody's fault. It's not women good, women bad, men good, men bad. It is what can we do to create a dialogue that will stop the emotional chaos that is rendering America incapable of functioning. The family is disintegrating. America's in flux. I say this a lot. You and I are traveling at the speed of light right now. Literally. We're sitting right here, but we're moving through space and time at a tremendous rate of speed. So the real question for me as a man is, when women ask that, all I want is a fair dialogue. And I'm looking at some change, and I'm not looking at carrying somebody else's. I'm certainly willing to be there as a supportive person. I'm willing to be there to listen and to talk. But I am not there to carry somebody's blame, frustration, and hatred. I'm just not capable of doing that anymore. And it's not mine to pick up and carry. And that is not demeaning anybody. It's just I think that we need to focus on what men and women can do so that, I'm 46 years old. It's what men and women can do, to stop the amount of damage that young people are inflicting. In situations like divorce, like you were talking about, where inevitably the child is in the middle between the two adults. There was a family court judge that wrote a recent article in which she said there was a police officer here in Albuquerque who was answered a call for domestic violence, and it was a mother and father fighting. The officer could tell that the boy there, young boy, early teens, late adolescence, was upset, so they exchanged numbers, and he and the boy became friends. And The boy would call him and they would talk. The upshot is at one time the boy tried to call him and couldn't reach him and committed suicide. When he got there and they were taking the boy's body away, the mother and father were still blaming each other. You know, the gist of the article was that the judge was saying that she recognized, and this was real empowering for me to hear a woman say this, that she saw the police officer who was also in a custody battle walk in and say, the battle stops here, walked into the courtroom and said, I'm not fighting with my wife anymore, I'm not putting my child in the middle anymore. If she wants to take the child to another city, which I think the issue was, she can. I'm not doing that to my kid. And one of the major issues in my experience as a parent, and one of them is to take those children out of the middle. And until men and women, you know, because this is about the hearth, man. This is about the family and the home and the heart and what's going on in here. Is that long-winded enough for you?
That's pretty long-winded.
That's pretty long-winded. That's
well, I think you hit a couple of things square on the nail head. I believe too that a lot of people are turning back to family and seeing that as a central value. A number of people, including Mrs. Barbara Bush, said that when people are on their deathbeds, they're not likely to think back to that last business deal that they closed or didn't close. They're going to be thinking back to the people who are close to them, their family, spouse, children, relatives. And I think that there is a renewed interest in the family and keeping the family as intact as possible. I think I know which judge wrote that article, and I believe that same person in a presentation to Dads Against Discrimination had once said that in most custody disputes you could easily determine, or just as easily determine who's the better parent or the best parent by flipping a coin, meaning that both parents love the children, they want what's best for them, they want to take care of them, they want them in their lives. But I don't think that the statistics as far as granting custody will bear that out. I think that the preponderance of cases, custody is granted to the mother. And my motivation in making the comment last week that Ruth, or last month, that Ruth had replied to, was simply that when women are not in a position to experience the devastation, the emotional devastation that many men go through when their children are taken away from them, taken out of their homes, there's not any fruit for a ground for dialogue, getting to understand one another. I think that when women see that they have just as good a chance of losing their children as keeping them in their home, that there will be a lot more understanding of what men go through. And that was my motivation. I think that if that judge would back her words with few actions that say, yes, fathers are important.
You know, I think, Mike, I think that courts have begun to, we're fairly lucky, I believe, here in Albuquerque because I'm sure that the courts are overloaded, but not nearly on the same level as they are in big cities in the country. And I know that a lot of the courts here in Albuquerque and a lot of attorneys, especially those who practice family law, are interested in things like mediation. And rather than being in there, and
I think that's great.
You know, I think that they are interested in solving a problem. But of course, I guess, you know, it's real easy to sit here and talk about this. But the emotional turmoil that someone goes through in a divorce, you know, I mean, none of us are saints. You know, I'm not sure. Maybe it's a situation of trying to get some. I don't know law that well, but maybe if we changed the ground rules a little bit and made things a little bit differently in the courts, so that the priorities were not the separation, so that the child was first, not just the division of property, you know, or which.
Well, there is a lot of emphasis on the relationships and the children, and growing emphasis on that. But my comment was meant simply as a suggestion that if more women had to walk a mile in our moccasins, our shoes, that we'd see a lot more understanding, and that there wouldn't be as many conflicts and as many arguments. So let's.
Well, I think you could also say if men had to walk a mile in.
They had to change dirty diapers at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, yeah,
day after day.
Blythe says that's how you cure puerism. He says that changing dirty diapers will bring your feet right down to earth, right away. So, of course, that's Blythe. That ain't me.
Well, gee, one of the other accusations, let's state this clearly, we're not trying to take children away from mothers any more than we want to see children taken away from dads. All I'm saying is that many men that I have talked to, and I've talked to an awful lot, really just want to be a part of that child's life, and they want to be considered more than just a source of money. And
being thought of
that's
as
the bottom line.
Being thought of as a work object and losing 8 or 9 years off of your life this century to stress, as a man, that'd be definitely something that I would like to change.
One of the other things that Ruth leveled at us was that it's us white men for 2,000 years, and I happen to know Ruth personally. I know
us white men for 2,000 years that what?
Have oppressed women, and I haven't oppressed anybody for more than 41 years. If I have in fact oppressed anybody, and I don't know anybody on the face of the earth who's been oppressed more than say 110 years by any one person or group. So I think this emphasis on what happened 100 years ago, or 200 years, or 2,000 years ago is sort of maybe a red herring.
Well,
I'd like to talk about that a little bit. You had your chance to be long-winded. It's my turn now. What can we say about our history? What kind of historical and cultural baggage has been dumped on our laps? Well, I think that one of the things that we can legitimately talk about is the roles and stereotypes that we assume and impose on others through the use of our language. We have language that, for instance, if I said a political candidate would claw another candidate's eyes out, the research shows that most listeners would assume that the political candidate doing the damage was a woman. It's a sexual stereotype built into our language. And that's a bit of cultural baggage. And I think it's a legitimate thing to take a look at, but to level an accusation at me that I have somehow oppressed people, women, whoever, for 2,000 years is just nonsense.
Well, there's in the article on Thelma and Louise, there is a lady named, let me look at that. We're a little ahead of ourselves, but she says that she thinks that she's a feminist, and she angered a lot of other feminists by saying that she believed that there is a certain amount of victimology going around, and that it's something that
right here, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, will you? Yeah, her name is. Well, it just happens to be the foal there, folks. She's a sexual philosopher named Camille Paglia, and she scoffs at the notion that violence against women is on the increase. And she's recently written a book called Sexual Persona, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson. And she thinks there's a very bad movement in America that she calls victimology. This is a view of oppressors and victims, and is a childish view of the world, and has to stop. And that brings back to my mind something that I wanted to say to something you said earlier. One of the things I'm hoping we can explore in future shows is to take a look at statistics. Because, they say the bottom line in numbers don't lie. And I think if we could begin to look at some of the realities, so much of it gets generalized. I found the little article that the press did, that the Journal Trib did here on Thelma and Louise, I thought was a neat little piece. They weren't biased, they were optimistic, they looked at both sides of it, and they just tried to get at the meat of the issue, and they really didn't proselytize anything. And I found, and one of the problems I have with the media, I think, sometimes is that, like feminism or other issues, the men's movement, tend to get trivialized and turned into caricatures, and in that trivial,
like wild men out in the woods shaking spears, and beating drums and acting crazy.
And and one of the things they say in the feature here is that as a result of that, nobody deals with any of the really valid issues. And then you get a bunch of anger, and you get a bunch of very vocal blamers and naysayers going with each other. See, the reality is, for me, is that the man who is destructive to women is also destructive to other men. The woman who is destructive to men is also destructive to other women. And what I'm beginning to find is I have so much input on men's social growth. I have so much input from society that on all issues, it's just images and continually inputting, trying to deal with this stuff. I don't have time for destroyers. What I have to look for in my life is people who are in the solution right now, trying to deal with it. And when I find women out there who, with a genuine interest in the hearth, the man and the child, that's who I have to look. That's who I have to look towards, and that's who I have to learn to try and honor, because I have a dialogue there, and something human can happen. And the rest, because it's going on in here, and the rest of this stuff, a lot of it is just kind of mouth rhetoric, and it's all up here, and it panders to the lowest common emotional denominator and creates the greatest amount of sensationalism, and everybody kind of goes ooh, ho hum, and turns over and goes back to sleep, and nothing changes.
You remind me of a quote that I've probably brought up a few times on this program, and I asked a journalist back in Utah, I said, why is there so much negative coverage of a particular issue? I don't remember what the issue was, and he said, well, good news is no news, and he said basically bad news is what sells papers, and selling papers is what brings in advertising revenue. And I think you're right. One of the reasons we have this program is to try to counterbalance some of that negative coverage about men and women, and spend a little bit of time talking about the issues rather than a 30-second soundbite. You did jump way ahead of us here. All the way to the end
as long as we're talking about caricatures, I saw the new motion picture. Is it Boys in the Hood? This weekend, and phenomenal motion picture. Some of the best drama I've ever seen. And if you listen to the press. What they look at is they look at
riots outside
the riots. They look at the tremendous film, Spike Lee's film, Jungle Fever. When you go see it, there are things in that motion picture that the press gives no recognition to. There are social statements and comments about what is happening in America's inner cities that nobody even feels is relevant enough to actually comment on. And it's tremendous social commentary in good films. We're talking about the family. Most of a main focus on Jungle Fever is black men trying to hold family and culture together in some of the most adverse situations, trying to make a stand against some intense insanity and social disintegration. And none of them see that. What they see, lowest common denominator.
That's one of the topics that we'd hoped to present on a show by now, and we've been having a heck of a time getting our guest lined up with a date that he can meet. Yeah, I think there's a tremendous problem there that we ought to spend a little bit of time talking about. But before we ramble, our director has done a short piece that I don't know if he's got it queued up yet, but in a few moments we'll have that piece ready to show you, and I think you'll like it. So Gee, we didn't beat that one to death, did we? We were going to talk about
Well, we've got
some of the replies.
We've
to
got a
Ruth.
half hour and a tape, Mike, so run the tape and we'll recoup.
Are we ready for that tape yet? Okay. Well, we'll be back in just a minute.
Well, you gathered a hand of weed, your arm around your sweet one, your Oldsmobile, sailing down the boulevard. You're looking for the heart of Saturday night. You get paid on Friday, your pockets are jingling, and you see the lights. Get all tingling 'cause you're cruising with a six. You're looking for the heart of Saturday night. And you comb your hair.
3.
Welcome back to Channel 99 Review, Public Access Television for Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm your host, Mike Rivas.
And I'm your co-host, Mike Kruchoski. We haven't noticed any phone calls, but that's okay. We're having a good time here talking. We did promise you that we'd be talking about Sam Keen's new book, Fire in the Belly. I don't know if any of the cameras can catch this. I was given this by my mother-in-law, who knows that I'm deeply involved in men's groups. And it was one of those books that I just breezed right through. I picked it up, and it was extremely interesting. I didn't like everything about it, everything that the author said, but I thought it was a tremendous book. And I finished it in record time. It's one of those books I just couldn't set down. Fire in the Belly on Being a Man. And both Mike and I have been reading this, and we're going to talk a little bit about it. Sam Keen takes a short tour through the history of male models and what is the male hero of each age in our history. He goes from the Paleolithic times to the Renaissance, to the American West, to today's corporate culture. And in each of those eras and other eras as well, he will take a look at what was considered the ultimate man, the hero, and what was the average man. And he's doing this in an attempt to work out a new role model for today's and the future's male hero. That's one of the things I liked about the book, that it is, as I see it, an honest attempt to find out where we are today and where we might go with our changing roles as women become more successful in business, outside the home, and whatever their endeavor, as more men become house husbands. I'm planning to, after I retire, spend a couple of years at home with the kids. We're going to see that our roles are confusing at times, and Sam Keen is making an effort to help define what that was. One of the things that he did was a survey in Psychology Today several years ago with a collaborator, and they published the survey, what is the ideal man, what is the average man, what is the villain. He took various quotes saying, every man for himself. Is that an example of a hero, or is that an example of a villain? And he tabulated these results. The results were pretty interesting. One of the other things that I liked about Sam Keen's comments is it ties in with your victimology. Not your victimology, but the philosopher's comment that there's a lot of victimology today. And
Feminist philosophers' comment.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And near the end of this book, Sam Keen takes a look at some of the allegations that men, white men, have been oppressing women for 2,000 years. And he takes that argument apart piece by piece and examines it. doesn't take it apart in the sense of trying to demolish it, but let's understand what the issues are. What I liked about his comments is that basically he has recognized what has been revealed in the recent social and psychological research, that there are no victims and perpetrators or oppressors, pure and simple, that in the relationships that we have every day, that we feed one another. I may say something to Mike that sets him off, that makes him angry. He says something to me. I can't say that he's an oppressor or a perpetrator because I have contributed to that problem. And Sam Keen takes a look at that and says that, I think he echoes what a lot of men I know are saying, basically that, yes, we know that we men have a lot of things to work through. The men's movement is looking inward to see what we can change about our own way of dealing with relationships, with love and work and family. But we would like to feel reassured that the women are doing the same thing, and many times men don't feel that. And Sam says basically that we have to get away from this victim oppressor or victim perpetrator attitude and look at what we do to create the problems for ourselves. And that's part of what men are doing in the men's movement. Now, Mike, you haven't quite finished the book yet. What have you thought about it so far?
Well, I saw Sam Keen with the Bill Moyers interview the other night.
That was just 2 or 3 nights ago.
2 or 3 nights ago, and he was doing workshops in which what he basically tried to do was get each of us to look at our lives as a mythic journey. It's a workshop for both men and women. And as I understood it, he used some simple techniques, like he would have you draw a picture of the home that you grew up in as a little boy. And then apparently he broke people up into groups, and you'd visit each other's houses kind of and walk through. He would have each person write a life story. And then when the story was complete, illustrate it with what each person considered. He said, you know, you would be trying to put like pictures into the book, and so you try to pick out the 10 biggest pictures in your life, the big turning points. And that what he hoped to do at a certain point was be able to separate, allow the person to separate themselves from the scripts and roles that they have been handed by society, by their moms and by their dads, and become who they are, and realize that they are the creators of their own journey, that they are a unique person carrying their own gift into this reality. And I thought that was pretty good. Apparently he was a friend of Joseph Campbell's, and he and Moyers talked about his life a little bit. They talked about the importance of money and judging people by money and judging the world by money, and trying to get a value system that allows you to. He had one.
Can I interject something
Yeah,
there?
sure.
Do you remember on our last program,
Excuse me.
Both Ruth and another caller commented about our attire that day, and I was wearing a tank top and a hat, and I felt pretty comfortable, and that's what I run around the house with and in. And I think that it's sort of interesting that both of them thought it was sort of rude and uncouth to get on TV in a tank top, or in, I can't remember quite what you wore, but isn't it really strange?
I was very well dressed.
You were, I remember. It was me. And I think that it's
You had
pretty
a hat
sad.
on, didn't you?
I had a hat on.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty sad that if you don't appear in a suit and tie, that you obviously don't have anything worthwhile to say. And I know that there are a lot of guys out there that don't like that kind of stereotype. You know, they say that clothes make the man, but in some ways that's just an oppressive role that we're forced into. I hate these damn things. I like the restaurant down in Texas where the owner would cut it off with the scissors as you walked in and nail it up on the wall. But to satisfy some of our viewers who don't think that I have anything worthwhile to say unless I have a suit and tie on, I wore one today and I'm god-awful hot. You were saying.
Oh, I was...
well, then let me carry on then.
All right.
Here's one quote that I found particularly good. We're talking about the victim-oppressor role, and the backlash has grown. Men are angry because they resent being blamed for everything that has gone wrong since Adam ate the apple. Yes, we feel guilty because we went to useless wars. I did. But what right do women who are in no danger of draft or combat have to criticize? Yes, we feel guilty because we created technologies that proved to be polluting. But didn't women, the poor, and the underdeveloped nations crave all those dishwashers, TVs, new cars, and labor-saving devices as well? And so that's an example of what I'm saying, that we all play a role. Yes, technology is perhaps dominated by white males in the management, but women play a role too. They buy gas-guzzling cars, take long trips, have dishwashers. All these things contribute to the problem.
Well, actually, if you think about it, you're talking about globalization, correct?
That's one of the problems.
Okay,
right.
and you're talking about a technology that this world is a village, really, and what we're struggling to do is learn to live together worldwide.
I certainly hope so.
Okay, so white men don't dominate the technology. White Anglo-Saxons used to control the major corporations in America, but the technology is controlled in the Orient now, in the Far East.
Well, the technology is driven by the demands of people who want, I like digital watches. I've got a computer at home, and I like all those labor-saving devices. I would be willing to pay more for them if I was assured that the manufacturers weren't dumping pollutants in the stream that I draw my drinking water from.
Mm-hmm.
And,
but how much do you really need when it gets down to? I saw Russell Means a few years ago, who's part of the American Indian movement, and Russell says that the question is not human rights or civil rights. The question is natural rights, and that is your right to food, water, and shelter, and access to food, water, and shelter, independent of corporate society, independent of the federal government. It was the case that he pointed out. So, how much is enough and what is valuable? What we have really, as I was saying before, I think, there's no end to the making of books. I like Sam's book. I like John Lee's. I like Robert Bly's. I think what I like about this little program is the fact that it is helping me begin to attempt to define a lifestyle and begin to bring into action some changes in my life, little bit at a time. And that's really what matters ultimately for me, and because I'm the person that I can affect. Do I come over and we do a show on sacred space and spirituality and the creation of sacred space, and then I go home and watch a whole lot of TV, and I think about sacred space again 2 months later when I stumble over the written material, some evening wandering through the house for a glass of water. It's how do I begin to bring these things into the reality of my life, because this is the point here where it all comes in. I think Sam's great. I think he's a good writer, and he's got a lot of good books out. I think some people are saying some really good things. But I'm looking at what can I do, to change things now, in me on a day-to-day basis. What kind of changes can I make? And one, it's like we ask these questions. What do men want? What do women want? Men are real polarized. I suspect that they only hear the really foaming at the mouth, rabid anti-male feminist. Because when they really are faced with relationships with women, and that involve the creation of family and child, and most of us are numb from the neck down anyway.
It's because your tie is too tight.
It's because our ties are too tight, and our priorities are skewed. It's like how do we begin to deal with that? Because I want to focus on what's positive. What can we do? And what I want to do is I want to hear the people that are really trying to say some things and bring about some positive changes through their actions, not blame. And I don't want to sit around and just react forever to what women say. I mean, they've got their pain, they got their cross to bear. They've got some really righteously real issues, that they're working on. And as a result of that, you and I are sitting here. You're producing this little television program,
and wondering what our roles are,
and redefining who we are.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. That quote that I had read just a few moments ago was from a chapter called, what the heck was it called? Women and Men and Women Coming Together. And I think that's a big part of the men's movement, is trying to figure out a way that we've been polarized for so many years. We felt like we're on opposite ends of the world. And now it's time to figure out how we can get along together again and do a little bit better job at it. Now, I think the one thing I didn't like about Sam Keene's book is he waxes very poetically. He's poetically long-winded. And I'm not much for poetry. I read lots of prose and not very much fiction at that. So that's the only thing I had to say about it. He's a very literate and
little
literary.
syrupy for you, huh?
Not syrupy, just I'm more direct and straightforward. I think it's a great book, and I recommend it to anybody, both men and women, and I gave it to my dad for Father's Day. I hope he is enjoying it. Well, we promised we'd talk about some current news.
We got a telephone call. Thanks for calling.
Yes, how you doing?
We're fine. How are you doing?
Okay.
Thanks for calling in.
Okay. You guys are talking about, male roles and the woman's roles, but I kind of find that in today's society, with women working more and asserting themselves more, the male role per se has really changed over the last 15, 20 years or so, and the old-time maleism, the head of the familyism, it's not the same as it was in years past. Have you found that to be true?
Well, I certainly agree that the roles are changing, and in a lot of ways, men, I'll speak for men, I won't speak for women, men are confused about what's expected of them, but in a lot of ways they know what's expected of them, and they don't buy it. They don't like the role that says they have to march off to war, and only men march off to war. They don't like being a work object and just providing the money. And as we grope towards a more equitable relationship with women and more functional families, yeah, things have changed. And I think they're changing for the better. I think we're just going through some real rough times.
You know what
Did I answer your question, or?
Well, I meant more in everyday situations in the home, in the relationships to each other, male and woman.
Well, I liked the John Bradshaw line where he said he was up in Las Vegas, Nevada, and he ran into a guy playing the slot machines, and the guy was sticking $5 tokens in the slots. And every now and then his wife would come over and he'd hand her a roll of nickels. And he happened to recognize John and said, let me introduce you to my better half. And John said, well, yeah, that was it. He's a $5 guy, and she's a nickel person, And I think that, and it's righteously true, I mean, women are not going to be the little woman, the quiet, demure, yes sir, no sir, anything, because most of them, a tremendous number of homes in America these days are run by women with very little support. Women trying to keep food on the table for their youngsters and getting like 60 or 70 cents on the dollar for what men are getting. Women are equal partners. I think marriage, anymore you look at it, you're figuring both people are going to go out there and work just to survive. you know.
Or just to buy the dishwasher and fancy car.
Or just to buy the dishwasher and fancy car.
I'm not sure we're getting at the heart of your question. Have we come anywhere close?
I think you hit it pretty good, and I thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, we were going to talk a little bit about current news, and
that number is 292-3263, right?
It sure is.
It should appear on the screen occasionally, 292-3263. We'd love you to call us, but if you would, because this is probably going to be our next to last program.
It's our last about 6 minutes, and we haven't even touched on Thelma and Louise.
Well, let's kick into Thelma and Louise then.
I haven't seen the movie, and I won't judge the movie based on not seeing it, as so many people do. I would guess that it's not male bashing. It is painful to see. They called it a new breed of heroine. This is the new woman who solves her problems by blowing guys away. And I think that it's pretty sad that as men are taking a look at their own violent behavior in many situations and trying to lessen the portrayal of violence in our society, that there are people who want to start portraying women in that same sort of role that we're trying to get away from. One of the comments that was made in this newspaper article was that, gee, if men thought it was so bad, how come they keep going to it? And I guess I would turn that around and say, well, gee, we've had all these, yeah, we've got a phone call. Let me just wind this out. If we have all these violent shows that portray men against other men and women, how come so many women go see it? I personally am not going to go see Terminator 2, nor am I going to go see Thelma and Louise. They're both violent movies, and I don't need gratuitous violence.
You want to go to the caller?
Sure do.
Thanks for calling.
Hi, Mike. This is Seth.
Hi,
Well,
Seth.
hello, Seth.
Figure you seem so lonely there without some phone calls. I better call you. Apologize for not making it tonight. My fire in the belly was caused by a Reuben sandwich and a lemon meringue pie. So I just apologize for not making it.
Would you say that again? Your fire in the belly was caused by what? A
A Reuben sandwich and a lemon meringue pie.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it was something obscene.
Walk slow and drink a lot of water.
Right. Anyhow, I was just calling in just to say hello. Apologize for not making it tonight. I didn't even know tonight was the last live show.
Well, that's it. Thanks for calling.
Okay.
God bless, Seth. Thanks, buddy.
Yeah, I did it wrong.
Well, that's
Well,
okay.
one of the other things that
Producers
was-
are allowed one mistake a show.
One mistake. We're coming down to our last couple of minutes. I want to get this comment in. One of the people that was interviewed, and we'll be gracious here, not quote names, but one of the people said, this is an accurate depiction of what goes on between men and women, that all these, and she said, all young men have rape on their minds all the time.
Well, I thought, I wanted to comment on that. First of all, let me say something real quick. I thought that the newspaper here did a tremendous, as I said before, a real honest attempt at giving a fair assessment of the motion picture, and they obviously did a lot of research on it. And the national writer, I guess, is a lady named Nancy Schulens, and Nancy basically put a lot of work into this thing. She looked at several motion pictures dealing with women's issues like Mortal Thoughts, Sleeping with the Enemy, not only Thelma and Louise, but several of them, and drew some real good conclusions, brought in some comments from women authors that were really to the point. What I'd like to say is the local fella interviewed, I think, 3 women and 2 men.
Right.
And one of the women, I thought, was fairly objective in her overview and made some real good comments. But, yeah, let me say this and I'll wrap it up in 30 seconds. There was a woman who said that she felt that all young men had rape on their mind continually, that the whole film was... And that we actually saw that as a rite of passage.
Rite of passage.
And
that's
the
right.
other one was that she felt the film accurately captured male bonding. Now, this is a person who is supposedly a reviewer for KUNM. And, I mean, that's the kind of thing that just boils your blood, to take every young man in America and depict him as a potential rapist, and then to drop catchphrases, you know, which she obviously has no understanding of, like rite of passage, or male bonding, which are just gross generalizations about men. It just amazes me. We're down to about 3 or 4 here before it's over. So,
well, I did some figuring in the article by Nancy Schullens. She said that there is a rape every 6 minutes, and I don't doubt that that's true. Those are the statistics. They're grim, and I think that men really need to get their heads screwed on straight about this. Rape is simply not acceptable. But I did some figuring, and there were a lot of assumptions I made, but with 125,000 males in the country, there's about 90,000 rapes per year, based on one every 6 minutes, and that comes out to not too many men out of 125 million men. Okay, we've got 2 minutes to wrap it up. This is our last show. Last live show, I'm sorry.
Last live program. We're going to do Lionel Corbett's tape next time, aren't we?
Right, and that's going to be a
Dr.
half
Lionel
hour.
Corbett, who's a tremendous Jungian analyst, who I thought was just one of the best folks we ever had come down and spend time with us. I want to see that one again myself. He bowled me completely over. Do you know the new times that we have coming up? And
Okay, we did say that we're Channel 99 off the air, and frankly, it hasn't worked as well as we'd like it to. One of the problems that we've had is that we've tried to be too many things to too many people. We tried to look at life in New Mexico and do movie reviews and so forth. We're going to cut back to a half-hour format and a new time slot Friday evenings at 7:30 every week, half-hour program. It's not going to be live, and gee, what else can I say about it? It starts Friday, August 2nd.
we're going to expand it. We're going to condense the interviews, but we're also going to try to have some poetry and some music and some other kinds of little bit more.
But they will all be focused on men's issues and men's relationships with themselves, with one another, and women. So, gee, how are we doing here?
Well, what it basically is I'd like to thank everybody who's called in over the last year or so that the program has gone on, and wish everybody Godspeed and God bless. Don't quit. What is it? You know, stand if you can, run if you have to, but don't quit trying.
Well, thanks everybody for watching. We hope you will watch our new program starting Friday, August 2nd.